Welcome to a live stream of the Your Next Mission podcast, proudly brought to you by Cavalry Agency, Navy Federal Credit Union, Purdue University Global, and Veterans United Home Loans. Now here's your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
Hello out there, veterans and families, and welcome to Your Next Mission podcast, a project initiative of the American Freedom Foundation. We're at the Air Force Memorial today to commemorate the tragic attack on 9/11, 20 years ago from the day. And what we want to do today is start out our podcast with a prayer. And I've asked the 8th Master Chief Petty Officer of the Coast Guard, to Dr. Vince Patton, to give us a prayer.
Good afternoon. As I start the prayer, I'd like to read passage from Psalm 46, verse 1 through 3, which says, "God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging." Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, Spirit of hope and life, we who worship you in many faiths come together on this solemn, memorable day to reflect not only on the tragic event that occurred in this country 20 years ago today, but also to recall those who lost their lives at the time and the selfless heroism of countless others, who not of themselves, but of others. From service members, first responders, co-workers, colleagues, strangers, and survivors alike, all are filled with the vivid reminders of such an unfortunate undertow of our freedom that struck us 20 years ago today. It is faith that we will remember that gave us strength and courage, and it is faith that will always hold us together. Dear Lord, let us always be reminded that when tragedy strikes, so does the opportunity for each of us to blend in fellowship to form one strength, one voice, to help in our collective healing process. It requires us to always believe that you are there for us in our time of need. We stand before you today, our Lord of hosts, humbled and obedient servants, reaching our hands out to you to continue to guide us and give us the strength and courage we need to help uphold the true faith and allegiance to this great nation. God, we ask that you keep your everlasting arms around us all. We will always pray for peace and commit to love for each other. We say and pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. For the next hour and a half, we'll have some incredible people come on the show that'll talk that were either directly or indirectly involved in 9/11. In our first segment, we have Colonel Michael Zuhlsdorf and Colonel Chuck Ennis from the United States Air Force that'll talk about where they were and what they was doing on 9/11. In the next segment, we'll have Colonel Marion Wills and Lieutenant Colonel Runfield that will talk about where they were on 9/11 and the impact that they have in 9/11 in the Pentagon. And on the last segment, we'll have Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Ivory and Command Sergeant Major Deborah Strickland. It'll talk about how their lives were changed on that day forever. And so this afternoon, we want to introduce our first guest, Colonel Zuhlsdorf. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
That's right, yeah.
I've been working on that. 11th Wing Commander.
Yes, sir.
At Anacostia.
Yes,
Bowling.
sir. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, Joint Base Anacostia Bowling Commander and 11th Wing Commander.
There you go. I got it. And Chuck Ennis. And sir, United States Air Force retired. Well, thanks a lot for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Before we get started, I'm sure all the guests would like to know just a little bit about you. And Colonel Zuhlsdorf, would you mind going first? Tell a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. First off, thank you very much, Sergeant Major, for having me on the show. I appreciate it. And Chuck, it's an honor to share the stage with you. Absolutely. Mike Zuhlsdorf, I've been in the Air Force for quite a few years. I started out enlisted, and I was a civil engineer when I was enlisted. Went into the University of Oklahoma, and I came back in and I became a civil engineer officer from there. And I've been at a number of different bases for the last 24 plus years as an officer. I've held command at the squadron level, at the group level, and now at the wing level out at Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. And I've deployed 4 times over the last 20 years. So twice to Iraq, once to Kirkuk, and the other one to Balad Air Base, which was Camp Wolverine, I believe, at the time, or Camp Anaconda. Sorry, Camp Anaconda. And then I was also at Kyrgyzstan and at Kandahar in Afghanistan. So
that's not normal for the Air Force. You deploy quite a bit.
I've only deployed 4 times. It's a lot, but some of my peers have deployed 8, 10 times, depending on which career field they are. But a lot of those mission support career fields did a lot of deployments to get over there to support the Army a lot.
I like that. I love that. Anyway, Colonel Ellis, sir, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Sergeant Major, for having us here today and for keeping the memory of 9/11 alive.
Thank you, sir.
And an opportunity to talk to you about how the first helicopter squadron responded on that day. It's an honor to be here, and I appreciate you hosting this. I spent 26 years in the Air Force, helicopter pilot for most of that time, and flew various missions, CSAR, Combat Search and Rescue, VIP airlift here at Andrews. I flew drug interdiction down in the Bahamas, schoolhouse instructor for a while. And then I went to a couple of staff jobs supporting NASA down in Florida, 7th Air Force exec officer in Korea, and finished my career in Okinawa in 2008, Mission Support Group.
Nice.
Yeah. And, so a little bit of your world.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. But I enjoyed every minute of it. I was deployed a few times, Desert Shield, Desert Storm, a little before the times that you were speaking of, but I spent 7 years abroad and 3-year tours in Japan and a 1-year tour in Korea. So mostly Asia time, but it's an honor to be here, and I look forward to this.
Well, thank you so much for being. I think you probably deployed just as much as I have. Not quite, not quite. Hey, sir, since we're at the Air Force Memorial, can you give us a little bit of history? I mean, I hate to say this, but I guess I have to. This is the first time I've ever been here.
Oh, gee. Well, welcome. We're glad that you're here, Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
So this is a beautiful memorial. Congress originally approved this in 1993. And then through some wonderful donation efforts, and then as we looked to fund it, we got an architect involved by the name of Mr. Freed, Justin Freed. And what he designed for us, as you see here, are these 3 spires that are representative of an Air Force Thunderbird pattern when they come in with precision and they do that bomb burst pattern is what that represents there. And what you also see here is how it's nice and shiny and it looks technologically advanced. And that's kind of what the Air Force represents when you kind of think about the Air Force and what we do. And if you look high enough, you're going to see space assets out there too. I'm confident of that. But you'll also see over here, we've got this bronze statues of the United States Air Force Honor Guard that are in a perpetual salute to the men and women who have both come before us and who currently serve and who are going to serve in our United States Air Force in the future. So that's what this represents. And it's just in a beautiful location. We have the high ground here. So I know the Army likes the high ground.
We always like that.
We truly have the high ground in the Air Force. So.
There you go. So I'm going to stay with you just for a couple of seconds. Tell me where you were on 9/11. I know we was talking the other day, and you interesting story. Anyway.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I was. I distinctly remember I was a young captain at the time, and I was one of the guys that was on leave. So I was not around an Air Force base at the time. But where I was fishing for muskies in Canada with my dad. We were on Lake of the Woods, and I distinctly remember that day being bluebird skies, beautiful green pine trees everywhere. The water was lapping gently across our boat, and I just thought what a peaceful day it was to get out there and just get some respite and relaxation. And we were off the grid. There was no connectivity at all where we were. We were 14 miles into Canada, and we got back to the lodge that night, and the lodge owner says, "Hey, you guys may want to turn the TV on. Something has happened in America." And so when Dad and I flipped that TV on and we were watching these planes crash into the towers and into the Pentagon, at first, like many, it's surreal and you don't want to believe it. And you think it's an action movie. And then you realize the gravity of what has just happened. And I distinctly remember my father turning to me and saying, "Your role in the military from here on out has just changed.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And at the time, as a captain, you can't really think through that. But as I've been in the service now for the last 20 years, I know exactly what he was telling me. He was a command sergeant major in the Wisconsin National Guard, and so he had that background and that perspective. And so as a captain, I didn't have that perspective yet, but I knew something was going to change.
I'm going to ask you in a few minutes. I'm sure it changed your life. Colonel, the same question: where and when, and how did you find out about 9/11?
Yeah, I served at the 1st Helicopter Squadron twice. The first tour, I was a captain, and it was the mid-'80s. I was just a line pilot, safety officer, the basic jobs of a company grade officer in the Air Force. The second time, I came back to serve as the director of operations in December of 2000, and later fleeted up to command of the squadron. That's where I got this shirt.
It's a good looking shirt.
It is.
I was on 9/11. I was the director of operations. I was in my office at the squadron. We have a mission control operations desk there, and we've got a supervisor of flying that's on duty all the time to monitor the flying that we do in the squadron. Lieutenant Colonel Doug White was on the desk and he it's probably one of our helicopters. No, interrupting me, right? That's
There
right.
you go.
But Doug was on the desk that day. He came into my office and said, "Hey, a plane just hit the World Trade Center," and it's just puzzling to hear something like that. And I walked out. The only TV we had at the time was at the desk. So I walked out, and we were looking at what was going on in New York real time on television. And as we were watching the television, the second plane came around and hit the second tower. And we knew immediately that we were under attack. Our nation was under attack. We had 3 aircraft flying at the time, and I asked Doug to start the recall so that we could prepare for executing our mission.
It's really funny that most people, of course, didn't see the first plane, but a lot of people seen the second plane here
Right.
in the Pentagon. It was just terrifying. And your Next Mission podcast live. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, and if you like, if you want to send us a message or send me a message on email, go to smatilley@yournextmission.org or call me at 844-424-1134 or text me any recommendations or suggestions that you have to help our veterans and families. And also, if you're on social media listening to us and you want to make a comment, send something to us, because this podcast is about helping our veterans and families each and every day. And that's what I and all the people on our team has really dedicated our life to do all we can each and every day for you. And so let's get back to the discussion. Because you talked just a minute ago about he was in the first helicopter squadron.
Right.
So your mission changed that day. And what exactly went on?
Yeah, it was a remarkable change in the days that came after 9/11. That day, our typical posture was to be on alert with 3 aircraft. We had 19 total aircraft in the inventory, and we would fly several sorties in the morning and several sorties in the afternoon. We had 3 aircraft out doing training missions. A couple of them were in the National Capital Region on the helicopter route structure that's around the region. And we had one that was a little further out in West Virginia on a cross-country type training mission. That was our normal posture. When we saw the second plane hit, like I mentioned before, we started the recall of those aircraft. They came back to the base. We were fortunate to get them back as they were shutting down the airspace, and we were able to get permission for that one that was in West Virginia to get all the way back home. But we quickly assembled everyone in the squadron, ops, maintenance, support people, and told them that we're going to put every airplane we have in the hangar on alert. So we put 15 aircraft out on the ramp, 15 of the 19 out on the ramp, assigned crews, and got them out to the aircraft, got the aircraft stood up on alert status so that we could get off the ground. The Huey will get off the ground 5 minutes from notification. We can have them in the air that quickly. So that was our posture. And as the events unfolded during the day, we transported dozens of people in support of
I'm just going to say
our
that.
national.
Did you go to the Pentagon and help them anyway with medevac and anybody?
We did. In addition to our normal operations missions, our plans, we had a couple other things that we were asked to do. And one of them was to bring medical personnel and supplies from Malcolm Grow Medical Center at Andrews over to the Pentagon. And we landed right down at the base of this hill on this side where the Army was landing their helicopters in support. And there were a number of civilian helicopters as well. And we were ferrying in medical personnel and supplies to assist with the recovery here at the Pentagon.
Did you ever go over to the Pentagon?
I didn't personally. I stayed back on the desk and trusted my crews to get the job done.
Yeah.
And they did a remarkable job.
Sir, about yourself, I'm sure you said a minute ago, you was a young captain there.
Yes.
And I used to say young captains, lieutenants, they don't know a whole lot, so you don't want to tell them a whole lot. But I would imagine if you look forward now, it probably changed the way you looked at things throughout your military career as far as planning.
Has. Yes, sir. The interesting thing I was mentioning to you earlier, I came in the mid 80s, and so we were in the Cold War.
I just say I came in the mid 60s.
Nope. Well, so we were training differently, right? You know, I think for sure the Air Force was, and I'm confident the other services were training differently. They had a different mindset. And then we went into Northern Watch, Southern Watch, you know, bridging that for the 90s. Yeah. And then this came, and it changed how we looked at training, I think, and how I would formulate and define the word readiness and what that means to me. I think it created this training mindset for myself to come up with a full spectrum of readiness, something that could address our near peer threats, but then go at what we needed to go at for the last 20 years as we fought this war in Iraq and Afghanistan and many other places around the world. And so I feel like I was on that cutting edge there when this went down. And I feel like I've been able to really drive hard to get to mission support readiness to enable important missions, whether we were directly supporting the Army, directly supporting our flyers, the Navy, whichever service that we needed to do. I felt like that really honed that edge a lot over the last 20 years.
Yeah, one of the things I just food for thought. One of the things I did, I was always deployed, gone somewhere, and quite frankly, I never called my wife very much. And after that day, I think I called my wife 2 or 3 times a day and talked to her. And it seemed to me that the little things in life mean a lot more now, maybe than they did before 9/11. Did anything like that happen to you guys? I mean, did you think about? Go ahead, sir.
Well, absolutely. I think it immediately gave me a greater appreciation of life. And to your point, distinctly remember, you know, calling my parents more often, my siblings more often, you know, the wife, the children. I think if anything, over the last 20 years, I've said I love you to a lot more people than maybe I probably would have before that time period, if that makes sense.
No, it does make a lot of sense. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, when I was in the service, my mother and father both passed away. And I think a lot of times we have a tendency just, it's not that you don't want to make contact with them. It's just that you're so focused on doing your military job that the little things that you wish maybe you would have did a little bit differently.
Right.
Yeah. Colonel, how about you, sir? Any things that you probably would have maybe changed a little bit, or maybe changed now, I guess?
Yeah, it certainly had a lasting impact on me, as it did everyone across the country and across the world. I think it was particularly impacting for those in the military. You know, we saw the people of New York come together to help as the days transpired after the fall of the 2 towers. And in the military, you saw the same thing. You saw people just build this new sense of cohesion and focus on the mission. You saw it in the young people going down to recruiting and signing up for the military. My son at the time my oldest son was 13 or 14 years old. Today, a lot because of 9/11, he's in the National Guard.
Awesome.
And it's just it was a tremendous thing to see people respond that way. And it's a difference that we have in our country, I think, as Americans.
Yeah. I think for me personally, I think on that day, a tragedy pulled us closer together.
Sure.
Yes.
And I hopefully I said this right, but it pulled you closer together to sort of, when you walk by people, they'd say hi, and for that just a matter of probably a week or so,
Right.
people were just a lot more friendly, and they wanted to help each other. They wanted to hug each other.
Yep.
There's little things. I think probably a lot more people went to church and prayed a little bit.
Absolutely.
Did you know anybody in the Pentagon, either one of you?
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not.
Yeah.
I knew a few people here. Got a phone call at the ops desk from Doc Fogelsong. He was at the time, he was the Vice Chief Staff of the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
He called our ops desk and said, "We need to move the air staff. We're going to relocate, and I need your helicopters." And so it was he, and then there were others that were more my contemporaries, of course, that I knew that were serving over here. I didn't know anybody that perished in the attack, though.
Were you surprised at the attack? I mean, you said already that you was shot.
Yeah, when the aircraft that we had out near West Virginia, when he was on his way back, he was circumventing around the Capitol, downtown area, obviously, just to stay away from any of what might be, considered a target. And we had the F-16s that were already starting to take off and guard, and they reported smoke coming from downtown, and it looked like it was coming from the Pentagon as they flew around the southwest side of the city on the Beltway, and it was shocking. And then we heard reports, minutes later, that the Pentagon had been hit.
Yeah.
So,
when you I guess going back to you, Colonel, in the Army was just upset as heck. I mean, they couldn't wait to find out who did this and go after them. And well, I tell you what, that was just unbelievable. That's for sure. Did you help shut down the air? I mean, they couldn't fly over the Pentagon at that time. Couldn't do anything. And did you fly into the VIPs? I know the White House and Congress and all other stuff. I don't know that. Maybe the wing commander or maybe something like that. I guess that's probably some of your missions too, isn't it?
yeah.
Yes, we would be doing that. Yeah, the DC National Guard out there, the 113th, they've got the F-16s that fly the patrols over the DC area,
Right.
so they would be coordinating that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The movements that we made that day, it was all had to be orchestrated carefully with air traffic control and the others who were controlling the airspace from a security standpoint. But we did make numerous movements. We moved literally dozens of people, and we had probably 70 or 80 sorties that day. It was quite a day.
So hours wise, I mean, so a normal flight for hours for a month, how many hours would you fly in a helicopter?
Normally on a given day, we would have maybe 12, 15 hours on the schedule, maybe 20 at the outside. We probably flew 70 or 80 that day.
Yeah.
So 4 or 5 days worth of flying in one day from about 9 o'clock onward.
Yeah. Are you prepared for something like that happen again ever?
So I think that well, first off, I don't think anybody's ever prepared for some kind of a tragedy like that.
Yeah.
But what I am confident in is that our military services, I think, are better prepared because of what happened 20 years ago. What I mean by that is the military services, I think, are more joint in their operations. I think command and control goes quicker now in these kind of situations. I think we're better plugged into the intel community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel in today's day and age, we're probably safer, but that does not mean that this won't happen again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
So I think, that's my thoughts on it. I don't know, Chuck, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, yesterday I was at a ceremony at Andrews for 9/11, and after the ceremony, I was able to go over to the squadron and tour the brand new building that Colonel Zulsdorf was responsible for making happen when he was at Andrews. What an incredible facility created there. And I toured the facility with the squadron commander, and then he called all the crews and maintenance into their heritage room, as they call it these days. And I wanted to, just describe briefly what happened on 9/11 and answer a few questions. But I walked away with a impression that, these guys are even more ready than we were 20 years ago, and I'm so proud to have been a part of it and see what they've accomplished.
Well, first of all, let me thank you for coming on the show today, and I really appreciate what you guys have done and what you continue to do. Any final thoughts or anything that you want to share with the audience?
You can go ahead, John.
Yeah, I had an experience in the days after 9/11 happened. It was, ops tempo was incredible, like it was for everyone. It wasn't unusual for me to go home in the evening and grab a bite to eat and go back to the squadron. I came home one day, it was just before 5, and the kids were playing in the playground. We lived on base, and they were playing in the playground behind the house with other kids. And as retreat sounded, the playground fell silent. And I went to the window and looked out, and the kids, age 6 to 14, probably a dozen of them, they had stopped, they had turned and faced the music, and they had put their hands on their hearts. And
That's cool.
what? I sat there and I took a deep breath and had a little tear in my eye, as you can imagine. And I said, there's more good in this world than there is evil, and we're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sir, yourself?
I agree with there's more good in this world than evil. I am grateful to be an American.
Absolutely.
I am thankful that we have great people who have left a legacy for us to carry, and that we are preparing these young soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, Guardians, the Space Guardians now. I firmly believe that we are in good hands with these next generations that are coming up. And events like this, as tragic as they were, proved to be very good learning grounds for the future. And as Americans, I don't think we should ever forget things like this. So
you're absolutely right on target. And again, I can't thank you, Colonel Zulsdorf and Colonel Ennis, for being on the show today. And again, thank you guys for what you do and what you continue to do. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major Army, and this is a live stream podcast. And hopefully you're listening and having a good time. But stick around for our next podcast. We have Colonel Marilyn Wills and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Greenwald. They're going to talk about the things or events that happened in the Pentagon and really how they survived on a very tragic day. And really thank you for listening. And don't go away. Please don't go away. We'll be right back.
You're watching a live stream podcast from the U.S. Air Force Memorial in Washington, D.C. Proudly presented by the Cavalry Agency. They help brands dominate no matter their size. Ideas, strategy, action. This is Cavalry. Learn more at cavalry.com. Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Their members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Purdue Global, providing affordable online education for hardworking adults. Learn more about a personalized, innovative, and world-class education at PurdueGlobal.edu. Veterans United Home Loans, the #1 VA lender for 5 straight years. If you're buying, they're funding your dreams. Learn more at VeteransUnited.com. Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
Short in mind because she's telling.
I think we have plenty of time. Okay. Welcome back. I'm Jack L. Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, and you're listening to Your Next Mission podcast with a bunch of great people. We're right here at the Air Force Memorial, overlooking the Pentagon and commemorating the tragic events that took place on this day and 9/11, 20 years ago today. And once again, I want to thank Colonel Zulsdorf and Colonel Ennis for being on the show today. They did a tremendous job, and we can't thank them enough for what they do and what they continue to do. But I'm blessed here today to have 2 Army veterans with me, Colonel Marilyn Wills, retired, and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Greenwald. I messed your name up last time, and I apologize for that. Well, first of all, how are you guys doing?
Doing well today.
No, don't dumb me up on me now. Get right in there. That's good.
I'm doing great today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I would like you guys to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. I mean, so they know you both were in the Army, but tell them who you are.
Yes. Sir Major, thank you for having me on
Well,
today.
thank you for being here.
It is it's an honor, and it's great to see you again after
Thank
all
you.
of these years. So I am Marilyn Wills. I'm from Monroe, Louisiana. I'm a retired colonel after 30 years in the Army. I retired as a military police officer. That's what I did in the Army.
Ooh.
But my last job, I was the Inspector General of all the forces in Afghanistan. I have been around the world and back, and I'm married. I have 2 girls, and I have the greatest news to share. I am finally a grandmother. I have a daughter. Her name is Paris.
There you go. Oh,
Yeah.
Paris is good. Well, I shouldn't do that. I will. I'm a great grandfather, so I got
yay.
2 great grandbabies. So how about yourself?
Sergeant Major, thanks for having me. It's always good to see you, and it's always good to see Marilyn again. So beautiful day. This is kind of like it was on 9/11, 2001. It was a beautiful day. Rob Grunwald grew up in Pennsylvania, went to Shippensburg University, ROTC, military policeman. I've known Marilyn for many years. I transitioned between military police and IT as a specialty, traveled around the world, deployed a couple of times also, and was here that day with Marilyn in a conference room going about business.
Yeah, that's a good question. Ma'am, I'm going to start with you. Where were you and what were you doing on that day?
Yeah, that morning it was beautiful here in Washington. Just a great fall morning.
Sort of like today.
Like today, exactly.
Yeah.
Had a little more coolness in the air because
Yeah.
we're getting ready for the fall. And that morning I got up. For some reason I was running late, and I had 2 little girls with head full of hair. Just didn't have time to do the hair. Told my husband, kiss you, goodbye. Normally we would pray, but I didn't pray that morning because I was running late for whatever reason. So I got on to the Pentagon and had a scheduled meeting, 9 o'clock every Tuesday morning. That Tuesday morning, got dressed in my new Army uniform, had just come out. I was excited. Went into a conference room, and the colonel started the meeting. So I looked at my watch and I said, it's going a little long, because about 9:15 is when the congressional officer would share information with the staff. Right about 9:30-ish, because I didn't know the time, the loudest explosion noise that I had ever heard.
And you didn't have no idea what
Had
it was.
no idea what it was. My first thought was something had happened in that area because we had just moved into a new area in the building. Wedge 1 was built. We were excited to move in. But from this explosion, I was on the E-ring, 2nd floor, right where you see that slide off. That's where our office was. In the conference room, I was thrown to the other side. Immediately, it's dark, it's smoky. I went for a door on the E-ring. The door was extremely hot. So I pulled my hand back and I crawled to the door that I had entered en route to a window to escape the room. As I exited that door, someone grabbed the back of my pants. And I said, "Tell me, who are you? Hold on to me, who are you?" And she told me her name was Lois. I knew Lois was in the meeting with me, so I told her, "Hold on to me. Where I go, you go. Don't let me go. We're going to get out of here." So I talked the whole time we were crawling in this room. I crawled from the E-ring to the C-ring.
And let people know when you was crawling, what was the conditions like?
Sorry, Major, it was dark. If you put your hand on your nose, you could see your hand. The smoke had almost sat on the floor. It was so hot in there that as I continued to talk, my throat was starting to close. And I needed to hydrate myself. Just so happened I had gone back to get my Black Army sweater. So I had that sweater on, and I had started to suck on that sweater. Lois stopped me and said she couldn't go any further. And I told her, "Lois, I have got to get you out of here. I can't leave you here." She's like, "I can't breathe."
Was that where you was at the intersection?
That we had not even been, I'm going to say, a few meters out of that room because the smoke was so thick. So I gave her the sleeve of my Army sweater and I said, "Suck on it." And so she sucked on the sleeve of my sweater and I'm sucking on the collar. When we stopped, I didn't know there were more people behind her.
How many? I'm going to stop here for a second. How many people were behind you?
So once we got to the window, I realized initially there were 7 of us. But when I got to the window, there were only 5. So 2, I had no idea what happened to them.
I've heard this story where people went left or right, and ones that went left lived, and ones that went right died.
It's very true. And just, I came out of the conference room and went to the left. not going to the right, that's where people would fall off into that wedge.
Yeah. Sir, go ahead. You was in the same conference room.
I was in the same conference room as Marilyn, sitting catty corner from her. And to me, it was a rumble that I heard. And as I'm facing the wall, and there's no windows here, a fireball comes through the window to Marilyn's right above her shoulder.
And the plane went underneath you?
Yeah, we were on the second floor, so the plane went underneath us on the first floor. So the fuel and everything caught fire, and the fire came in the room there, and that's when it went instantaneously black. And the smoke started to come in, and the wall fractured and came down. And we had one of those popcorn ceiling thing, and it just blew into a million pieces. And then it went black. And then what do you do? Marilyn talked about her first thought. My first thought was, I was upset. I was the IT guy. I had worked for a year.
You thought IT blew up or something.
To get into the new wedge of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
And now I've got to do this all over again because a construction worker had hit a line. There was a gas explosion, whatever. That was my first selfish thought. That lasted a millisecond because now I got to get out of there. My friend Martha was down at the other end of the table, and she screamed for help. And I said, Martha, I'll come get you.
Was she the one that went under the table?
She went under the table. Her first reaction, as many people would, the sky is falling. I'm going to get under the table and somebody's going to come get me. And there was no time for that. So I crawled over the table and I got to Martha, and she's not a large person. And she grabbed my belt and said, I got you. And I said, Martha, I'll get you out. Similar to her experience with Lois, Martha was hanging on me as we crawled, and had a very similar story. You were low crawling. You couldn't, you were high crawling. You couldn't stand up. Anytime you tried to stand up, the smoke was so thick you couldn't breathe, you couldn't see, and the heat from the fire would just knock you down.
Did you see each other when you was crawling out?
No. Her and her group left before I did because she noticed the door was closed, and she went around the table and got other folks, and I was going into the room to get Martha. So I was behind her by a few seconds.
But you went right and she went left.
Well, she went left and I went left for a minute and then went right. If you would have gone right, you would have ended up on E-ring and you would have burned like several of our colleagues in that conference room.
Yeah. So let's go back to where you was. So you got there and Lois had stopped and she said, I can't go any farther. So pick it up from there.
She said she couldn't go any farther. And she had a dress on, so she had nylons. And she said that her legs were burning, that her nylons were melting on her legs because it was so hot. And I told her, Lois, you can't get on my back. I'll carry you.
Oh, wow.
I will carry you out of this building because I will not tell your children I left you. So we continued to crawl, and I would crawl into a cubicle and would have to back up because I knew there was a window, but because of the explosion, everything had collapsed.
A lot of people probably don't think about when you think about the cubicles and things that are in there, and you can't see anything, and you're crawling around trying to work your way through, and you probably went into a lot of cubicles.
Went into a lot of cubicles, backed out, and continued to go forward. And back in 2000, there was the new watch, the Timex, with the Indigo.
I never get anything new. But
So the Indigo, but I didn't have my watch blew off my arm, so I had nothing to help me see. And I just prayed and said, God, show me. And I saw the smallest light to that window. And I got to the window, and that's when I realized there were 5 of us. Now, I told you there were 7. Regina was in this chain of crawl. But when we got to the window, Regina wasn't there.
Regina
Grant. I had no idea where she went. But I knew she was in that building.
Did they make it?
She did make it out.
Okay.
And she went in a different direction and assisted someone else.
You said there's 7. Who's the other person?
So it was Colonel McNair in my chain, who was my colonel at the time. It was myself, Lois, Miss Day, Betty Maxfield. So we're at this window now, and another soldier was to the left, Specialist Petrovich. He picked up a printer and threw it at the window, and it fell right into my lap. So
but a lot of people don't realize that on the window it had the Mylar on the window.
It had the Mylar. It would not break. It was bomb-proof. And it just would not break. He threw the printer again, and it bounced in my lap. And at this time, I'm thinking we're going to die. I brought these people here, and it's my responsibility to get them out. We're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Colonel McNair, myself, and Petrovich, we started beating on the frame of the window, and the window popped open.
Yeah.
Just small enough for a kid to get through that window. And we continued to pound on that window. And once that window popped open, the smoke just bellowed out.
Yeah.
And I was able to bend my head out and take a breath.
Yeah.
And the folks in A&E Drive, they saw us and they said, jump, we're going to catch you. We lowered Petrovich out of the window because that soldier had been burned pretty bad.
Did you get burned in that?
I got burns on my arms and really on my legs. I got a bunch of scratches from the explosion. And then we lowered Lois out. The next person went out was Miss Day.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately for her, she would not let go of my arms.
Mm-hmm.
So I peeled her fingers off and I told her, Day, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But when she went out, she was flailing her arms and legs, and she ended up injuring herself. She broke a leg, and she injured the soldier commander who was catching us because he fell. And that left Sergeant Major and I in the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Sergeant Major, Regina is in there. Where is she? I know we have to go back.
Mm-hmm.
So he tried to go back. And I told him, sir, I don't see you. Talk to me.
Yeah.
And he said, he came back and he's like, I can't.
Yeah.
And I said, if we're quiet, maybe we'll hear people.
Yeah. Yeah.
We heard nothing, Sergeant Major.
Well, sir, how about yourself? We talked about you got to the corner. She went. I guess you went straight or left and tried to get out. Got out the window. How did you get out?
We crawled. I knew the direction that I wanted to go as the IT officer. I helped set up all the cubicles, all the copiers, all the faxes, all the scanners. So I knew the blueprint of the office better than most. So my goal was to get to the fourth corridor. She was going to go out the windows for A&E ring, and I was going to go out the fourth corner. Now you got to remember, we don't know what happened.
Yeah.
We don't know that there's a plane literally burning beneath us, and we're literally crawling to what we believe is safety, but have no idea.
Yeah.
Have no idea. You can't see. You can hear that fire alarm. Fire emergency has been declared in the building. Please evacuate. The sprinkler system goes on, and we're crawling. And similar to Marilyn, pushing things out of the way, hoping you don't run out of luck.
Yeah.
And at one point, Martha lost hold of my belt, and she said, "Rob, don't you leave me." And I said, "No, I got you." But there was a time. It was a good crawl, and there was a time where you just believe that, how much smoke have I inhaled? How much further do I have to go? I can't see anything. Are we going to make it?
Yeah.
And we finally crawled all the way to the C ring, fourth corridor, and we got onto the fourth corridor, and we realized that we were safe. The fourth corridor had no smoke in it at all. And I gave Martha to some rescuers, and I went back in. And Martha said, "Rob, you can't." And I, similar, you're not going to leave a fallen soldier behind.
Yeah.
And I went back in. But at that time, there was really not very far that you could go back in. The smoke is to the floor. And you even talked to yourself about, the exit signs.
Yeah.
We did a lot of renovation on the new Pentagon, and we put, reflective tape on the floor.
Yeah.
So people
Because
get
it
out.
doesn't do you any good to see an exit sign above a door when you're crawling on your hands and knees and can't see anything.
I can't imagine. Hold that thought for a second. You're listening to Your Next Mission podcast with me, Jack Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. And if you want to send me a review or a comment about the podcast today, or have a suggestion for us to have a podcast, go to SMA Tilley at yournextmission.org, or send me an email or text at 844-424-1134. And if you're watching us on your social media channels, send us a comment. Tell us about what you'd like to have on the podcast, because we're all in this together. We're all veterans, and we want to try to help each other as much as we can each and every day. And going back to you two, it's as you talk about it, it's hard not to cry.
Yeah.
Because I know you start to choke up there a little bit. For me, I've had post-traumatic stress for probably 40 years. I was overran when I was a young soldier. What kind of effects have you guys had? I mean, does any effect from 9/11, emotionally that you had? either now or then or even now, I guess.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I'll start with you.
Yeah, for the short term, it was difficult to go back into the building, but I knew I had to.
Yeah, we had a lot of people that came up that called me and said, I don't want to go back in. And I go talk to them and sit down.
Yeah. So that was the short term. Another short term was, we got this helicopter, dealing with my family.
Yeah.
I was angry. I would yell at my children for no reason, and I knew something just wasn't right. And so I had to go seek help. That's not something we like to do as soldiers, and especially as senior officers. But I knew I had to. And so, yes, I've been diagnosed with PTSD.
Yeah.
And I'll shout it from the rooftop. We have to get help. It's a mental health issue.
Yeah.
I was just at the ceremony today, and something happened with a speaker, and I nearly jumped out of the chair.
Yeah.
Just the startled noise, all of that it still affects me.
Yeah. It'll never go away. Real quick story. I was overweight when I was a young soldier years ago in Vietnam, and even to this day, there's certain things that I say that I'll tear up, and it's hard for me to get through.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but I'm glad that you went to someone that got some help.
Absolutely.
Everybody needs help at one point of your life, and that's a smart thing to do. And I think
right.
the smartest thing to do if you're a soldier, airman, Marine, sailor, Coast Guard, and whatever, is talk to the people around you.
Absolutely.
And a lot of time you keep that stuff inside of you and it doesn't help. So how about yourself?
Yeah, I also sought some counseling, and mine was more survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
I in this conference room that we were at, the person that sat to my right died. The person that sat to my left died.
Didn't they both go into General Maud's office or something?
Well, Max Belkey went into General Maud's office. He was sitting to my left. The person sitting to my right and the person sitting to Max's left, who was Dennis Johnson, Lieutenant Colonel Dennis Johnson, they went into the E-ring where they perished. So I went out to dinner with someone once, and to have that question, why are you here and my husband is not? And that's just how do you reconcile that? So I went to counseling for a while to be able to adjust to why we couldn't help more people, why I'm here and they're not, and it's difficult. I have a similar sudden startle response, and my wife she's been great for all these years, and she gave me my space when I needed it. And right after 9/11, we were going to funerals for months and months and months, and I would go to my son's soccer game, and I helped coach his team, and I'd go in my Class A's, and after the game was over, we'd shake hands, and I'd go to a funeral at Arlington National, and after that, I'd go to the building because I was there 2 days later, 3 days later, after I got out of the hospital.
Yeah, what a lot of people. I was a sergeant major at the Army at that time. I went to so many funerals.
Yes.
I got so depressed that I told the chief that I can't go to all of them, but I tried to go to all of them, but it's just.
Well, it was surreal.
It was because you knew so many people.
So many people.
But the where Arlington National is, and in Area 64 where they buried our buddies, you would be in the Arlington National burying a colleague while the planes were taking off over the Pentagon, and you could still see the remains of the building from where it was. And that to me was just such a juxtaposition that's just hard to imagine.
Yeah, it's when I look back on it even today, I wonder about, I was in the Pentagon when I was walking out of the Pentagon. I watched neither one of you seen the second plane hit on the TV.
No,
we didn't know about the first
we didn't
one.
know the first.
You don't know the first plane hit, but I watched the second plane hit. David Shadd called me and says, turn on the TV, and I turned on the TV and watched the second plane hit. And when it hit, I got up and I was walking out, and I told the people in the office, I said, stay close to the phone, keep me informed about what's going on. And then I said, I don't know why, I didn't remember saying it, but I said, this was not an accident. It could happen to us. And I left and went through the Pentagon, and I went over to Fort Myers and then came back. But it's something I don't think you'll ever get over.
We'll never get over it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, as Rob was saying, Dwayne Williams, a friend of mine, we lost him that morning.
Yeah.
He sat in my chair in my office. And so I struggled to get over that. Why him and not me?
You know, I've talked to people about that before.
Yes.
You know, why does somebody get hurt and I don't get? I just think it's by the grace of God.
It's the grace of God.
And
yeah, absolutely.
It's just tough. Any reservation? I mean, anything that's just sort of bugged you after the last 20 years? I mean, something that's been on your mind that you just can't get out of your mind. I mean, something that you think, gee, if I just did something different, would it, things been different? I guess.
You know, it bugs me the way our country was so divided. The way our country has been so divided. And we're a country of love, and we're a country of peace and unity. That has bothered me. And then to hear that it has happened even in our military forces, it bothers me. So I heard the president yesterday talking about unity, and my pitch has been on love and peace and just loving each other. You know, it was so great during that time 20 years ago when my parents traveled from Louisiana to Washington, D.C. and paid for nothing. Nothing in their travel because of the love and the connections that we had with one another, you know?
Same question to you.
And a very similar response, you know, it's been talked about recently. Everybody had an American flag and everybody said please and thank you. And everybody was kind and heck, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, you wouldn't even honk your horn. I mean, it seems
that's a miracle in DC.
Things that seem so foreign today. And everybody was kind and everybody was united and we all had one mission and we all had one role and we were all rowing in the same direction. And I wish we could go back to that because the generation that's growing up now with everything we have in the world going on both here and overseas, I don't think they can understand what it was like after 9/11 and how this country came together.
You know, there's good and bad that happens in everything. And when something bad happens, something good comes out. And I think the good thing that came out of that was that for our country, for just a short period of time, really pulled together.
Absolutely.
And they really loved each other. Just what you just said a minute ago. And it wasn't about anything. It was just about, you know, take people who they are and don't look at something that's not there. Just love people for who they are. I mean, I love this country. I love everything about this country. And I think for the most part, people in this country just want to get along. And so that's good. The Army's a little bit different, though. The military's a little bit different. I can't say Army. I'm an Army guy, but you got to say all.
It's got the military.
That's right. It's the military. But the services are all different because we're a closed society. And we're really part of a family that stays together all the time. Do you still stay in contact with the people?
I stay in contact with people who I met 30 years ago.
But 9/11 people.
9/11 people, yes, absolutely. And but even, you know, not just them. They are a small part of my knowing of people, but all of those who were before that. You know, I did lose contact with Marion Server's daughter, who I absolutely loved when we were in the building, and I wanted my relationship with my daughters like she and her daughter. But she was getting ready to go to college, and life was just wonderful. So keep in contact with them. I just talked to Martha Carden the other day. It's just great to keep in contact with folks.
Martha and I talk every Monday and have for 20 years. And I'm a docent at the Pentagon Memorial, so I see a lot of people that were affected more than others, some survivors and some people that I work with. So I am connected to the Pentagon Memorial, the 911 Org Association. So I dedicate a lot of my volunteer time to keeping this fresh and making sure that the next generation doesn't forget.
First of all, thanks a lot for talking to me today and bring about memories, some good, some not so good. But any final thoughts, anything you want to share with the audience about 9/11 or anything you want to share?
Just final thoughts of keeping this memory alive. You know, children, I taught third grade, and of course they weren't born at the time. And then I taught at Trinity University, and they weren't born. But it's to continue to share the story of what happened here on 9/11. And that is so important, that the next generation know what happened here.
Absolutely, sir.
And there's talk and there's planning for a museum of sorts and a convention center to remember 9/11 between here and the Pentagon. That's going to be built, we hope, in a few years. So that would be a great thing to remember and to honor people. But this is supposed to be a day of volunteerism, a day of giving, and so a day of service.
Yeah.
And so I like to think that I became a kinder, gentler person after 9/11, a little more loving family member. I had some relatives that drove down from Philadelphia after I got out of the hospital, gave me a hug, literally, and I got a cup of water and drove home. And that's family. And that's what it's all about. So volunteerism, family, loving your neighbor is a great thing.
I think the funny thing, last thing, I'll wrap it up real quick, is that if I haven't talked to you in 20 years and I call you, it's like we're his neighbors.
That's right.
And people never forget.
That's right.
So I just want to thank Colonel Marilyn Wills and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Greenwald. I messed it up last time, for being on the show today and talking about their incredible stories about life in the Pentagon and the things that went on and just what they just said. We never should forget 9/11 and the people that we lost that day and the friends that we lost that day. Then the next segment is Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Ivory and Command Sergeant Major Deborah Strickland will come on. They're going to talk about each one of them, about the things that I don't know if they can get through it. I'm not sure I can get through it, but each one of them lost their spouse during 9/11, and so it's not about you. It is about you. It's about life. It's about God. It's about staying together each and every day to have a great country all the way through. So thanks for watching. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. There you go.
You're watching a live stream podcast from the U.S. Air Force Memorial in Washington, D.C. Proudly presented by the Cavalry Agency. They help brands dominate no matter their size. Ideas, strategy, action. This is Cavalry. Learn more at cavalry.com. Navy Federal Credit Union, the most trusted credit union owned by members of the military community, serving all branches of the armed forces and their families. Their members are the mission. Learn more at NavyFederal.org. Purdue Global, providing affordable online education for hardworking adults. Learn more about a personalized, innovative, and world-class education at PurdueGlobal.edu. Veterans United Home Loans, the #1 VA lender for 5 straight years. If you're buying, they're funding your dreams. Learn more at VeteransUnited.com. Now back to your host, the 12th Sergeant Major of the Army and co-founder of the American Freedom Foundation, Jack L. Tilley.
I'm Jack Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army, and your host for today's podcast. And today we're live at the Air Force Memorial and commemorating the 20th anniversary of 9/11. Today, 20 years ago today, at 9:37, a plane struck the Pentagon. And I want to thank our last guest that was just on, Colonel Marilyn Wills and Lieutenant Colonel Robert Greenwald, for being on the show. And thanks a lot for their comments. And now I'd like to welcome to my great friend, Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Ivory and Command Sergeant Major Deborah Strickland, for being on the show. And I know this is hard for me to talk about, but each one of you lost your spouse. Sergeant Major Lacey Ivory and Sergeant Major Larry Strickland. I'm sorry, I just, again, they're good friends of mine too. And I know how tough it's got to be, and just to change your life completely. And so I would ask each one of you just tell the audience just a little bit about yourself. Maybe what you've been doing for the last 3 or 4, 10 years, or whatever you want to tell. Just to give them a little introduction about you.
Well, hello, I'm Deborah Ivy. I'm from Baltimore originally. After retiring from the military, I moved back to Baltimore to help out with my family. My mom and my grandma were becoming older and having health challenges, so I decided it's time to come home and stay. So I've been there since then. I've been to seminary school. I've been a grant writer for my church, for a nonprofit, for youth, and now I'm currently working at Visit Baltimore.
Oh my gosh, you're saying busy.
I know.
Strickland, can you go ahead? I'm switching these names around here.
No, it's okay.
Sergeant Major, you know that I stayed in the Army for another 8 years after September 11th,
Yeah.
and I retired around my 37th year of service. And nothing that I thought was going to happen in my follow-on life actually occurred. Larry's oldest, Julia, had a baby later in life, and I found myself in childcare for about 5 years. So while it may sound strange for someone out of the military to do that, it's what I did when I was on active duty. It seems like I was caring for soldiers in such a fashion that their families didn't have to worry about it. My final assignment was a year in Afghanistan. So if I had to say my life afterwards, it's been quite busy, mostly with family.
Yeah. I know one of the things that, I know you was going to get out of the Army, and we talked and says, hey, no, stick around. You know.
Yes.
Did you think that was therapy for you to stick around a little bit?
Well, I didn't really have a lot of choice. I thought I was going to immediately put in my retirement just to have some privacy associated with what had just happened. And I worked for a wonderful garrison at Fort Belvoir, and Colonel Kurt Weaver and everyone that he had working for him lectured me about the type of things that were, important for someone that had gone through a tragedy of that nature, and to wait about a year. So the year turned into 8, and it was therapeutic that I had other obligations to take care of in the Army. I can't say that I would have done it the same way today, but then I was quite susceptible to listening to my commander, and he seemed knowledgeable. So it did work out for me, and I think it was therapeutic.
Colonel Ivor, can you walk us through that day? I know it's probably difficult. And if I say something that you don't want to answer, just stop right there. Can you talk me through that day? How you found out, how you was notified? I mean,
Well, that particular day, Lace and I slugged in to work, and
you may want to tell people what slugging is. They may think you're hitting somebody.
Yes, slugging is when you're able to go to a park and ride and catch a ride with someone else and come down the HOV lanes. And so we had slugged into work that day, and then I caught the metro to Army Personnel Command that used to be in Alexandria, Virginia at the time, to work. And when I got to work, it was like I had missed all of the plane in New York, and I didn't hear about it until I got on the metro. So I was really, really concerned, couldn't wait to get in the office and find out what was going on. When I arrived in my office, it was just pandemonium. All my civilians, I was upset. No one knew what was going on. They kept asking me for guidance on, they wanted to go home, they wanted to check on their families. And I was told that we need to stay in place until we were given the orders to be able to, to leave and move about. In the meantime, they had hit the Pentagon, and then everybody it was just kind of hard to keep everybody calm at that point. We were just trying to find out where they hit it at the Pentagon, what side, who was hurt, who was impacted. So eventually we were told that the plane went into the G1 wing, and but that's all they knew at that point. So of course I'm on the phone, I'm calling Lacey constantly because he worked in the Pentagon, and I just wanted to make sure he was fine, or he'll get a little bit more information or whatever from him. And it kept going to voicemail. And Lacey, trust me, he would answer the phone. So
what was his job at that time?
He was working in MSA, MNRA. He was the sergeant major there. And so I kept calling, I couldn't get him on the phone. So I said, I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to be calm, ask God to calm my spirit, because I didn't want to try to assume anything at the time. So eventually we were told that everybody could go home. And then I didn't know what to do. I had slugged in. You couldn't get home. The metro wasn't running. The VRE, nothing was running. So a friend of mine, a coworker, gave me a lift and gave me a ride home. And I was pretty apprehensive about leaving to go home because I didn't know Lacey's status. So when I arrived home, I still hadn't heard anything. I got a call from the Army G1's office. They were calling to check on folks, and see who was who and who was home, who was where, just trying to, locate folks. Still no word from Lace. So I walked, like it took a 6-mile walk. I said, okay, help me calm down. All I could do was pray. Lacey's family members were calling, they just wanted to know if we were all right. And I didn't have the heart to tell them that I hadn't heard from Lace yet, as I was still just trying to be optimistic. So no word. And finally, my girlfriend called me and said, well, I don't want you to be home by yourself. So she came. I was living in Dale City at the time. So she came and stayed with me. And all we did was watch TV constantly to see what, if they found a body or if somebody was in the hospital or whatever. And I think I just mentally shut down because it was too much. I just couldn't conceive the fact that I hadn't heard from Lacey. It's later in the day. It's not like him. I didn't know where he was. I still wanted to be optimistic that he was okay. Us military folks are news junkies. So, I'm sitting and watching blow by blow. And then my girlfriend said, well, maybe it's not a good idea for you to watch the blow by blow. Yeah. So I said, well, maybe you're right, but I'm just anxious. I don't know where Lacey is. But anyway, make a long story short, it was weeks, living like that.
Weeks before you was notified?
It was weeks living like that, not sure, if he made it out or if he was one of those folks that was in the hospital. Then they set up, I guess you want to call it like I don't know what you want to call it, at the Marriott. It was the Marriott in Crystal City. So I would go every day to see if they had heard anything about Lace. They asked for a brush, so they could get his hair or
for DNA.
For DNA. And so but the setup was nice because they had casualty assistants, they had personnel folks, they had everything you would need, like all in one place. And everybody was trying to be encouraging and supportive. But on September the 21st, when I saw you get out the car, I'm sorry.
Same question.
I'm sorry.
Not Deborah. Oh, Sergeant Major, you know that it was a day like today. It was gorgeous. And we were running an access control exercise at Fort Belvoir. So we'd done an aerial that morning to look at the traffic back up on Route 1. And while it was a little hosed up, it wasn't unmanageable. And we'd gone to one of the gates over in Woodlawn. I don't believe it's still there anymore. And our MP First Sergeant came over, First Sergeant Branham, and he told the boss that there had been planes in the towers. His wife had called him, and he just turned. It was kind of quiet. He said, let's go back to headquarters. And, MDW has a unit that's based out of Washington, New York City. So he didn't know if we would have some sort of mission to support something. So we went back to the headquarters. And as we were in the car, the driver looked over his shoulder at me and he said, that there was a plane that hit the Pentagon as well. So it was kind of a solid quiet for the rest of the trip. Made it back to the office. And of course, everyone was glued to the news, watching it on TV. And I went in long enough to see where I thought this was really affected at the Pentagon. But my husband was like every other military. If he would have known or had the ability to call, he would have done that right away to make sure that we weren't worried about it. So his oldest daughter, Julia, made her way. She was at work. She made her way to Fort Belvoir and joined me in the office. And we waited till around 4 because traffic had come to such a standstill on Route 1 that I sat in the car for 45 minutes trying to leave post. And I knew that would not be, I would not make it to the Pentagon during this time period. So we left to go home around 4:30. And then both of us separately made our way back to the Pentagon that night and kind of had a rendezvous. It was everything that was impossible to describe. Mm-hmm. We were on site. We stayed in a tent because they didn't have control of the site yet, and they hadn't closed it off. We had a lot of people that were still milling about, and we ended up being asked to leave the area where we were waiting to find out some information. And we stayed in his car. His truck was there in South Parking. And so we spent the night there. And the next morning, through the night, you could see through the windows, they were still trying to put the fire out at the Pentagon. So you had all the surreal glowing that was occurring from the fires and the arcing of the water jets from the fire department trying to subdue it. And it was just unreal. I didn't believe any of it. I was pretty certain that Larry would have been one of those that made it through that event, listening to Colonel Grunwald talk about their circumstances. I found out much later that Larry and Kip Taylor were standing together whenever this...
Larry didn't have to be there either, did he?
No, he didn't. He was a month out from retirement. And that morning we had that very same conversation. But he was emphatic about that he had a meeting that he had promised to be at. And so he made his way into work that morning after we had a little discussion about the fact that he had so many other things that he could be doing to prepare for retirement. So, no, he went in. It's something I keep reliving when I think about how short a time we had that discussion. And if I'd been a little more emphatic, maybe he would not have gone into work on time. Everything that you see in the pictures were an experience that we had that day, on the ground. It was amazing to watch the soldiers pull together. And the only reason they let me stay was because the MDW engineer company, they were a search and rescue, had a search and rescue mission. And so they were on site, and I was their sergeant major for the garrison, and I was able to remain there. It wasn't until later that first day that I understood the enormity of the collapse, because you saw the facade that was down, and I kept thinking that must mean the structure was still behind it and that they would be able to find their way to survivors. But Sergeant Brown was one of the platoon sergeants, and he came over to check in. He was there looking for his mother-in-law who died at the Pentagon that day. And he told me that what I saw was just a shell, that actually the aircraft had taken out the E and the D ring, and they were looking in the C and beyond. So I knew then that whatever news came from this was terrible. So, yeah.
We're talking with Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Avery and Sergeant Major Deborah Strickland, and this is Your Next Mission live at the Air Force Memorial in Washington, D.C. And if you want to reach out to me and make a comment, you can at smatilley@yournextmission.org, or text me or call me at 844-424-1134, or on your social media channels. If you have a comment or something that you want to make a comment about, send me a little comment. Send me, hopefully it's a good comment about what we're doing here today, because I think it's important for us never to forget what happened on 9/11 and the people that lost their lives on that day. I'm so sad for you, just sitting there thinking about how your lives were changed. When you lost your spouse, how did you adjust your life? What did you do? There's a lot of things that you have to go through and a lot of decisions that you have to make, and your life was just flipped upside down. So, did people help you, or was a lot of people up? I guess I'm asking you, ma'am, if you're okay now what happened? What'd you do then?
Well, I think it was such an outpouring of love and support from all around the country. We just started getting mail, gifts in the mail, cars.
Hopefully money.
Well, some money, but I'm just saying, like, encouraging stuff. I have never in my life witnessed something to that magnitude as far as what happened at the Pentagon, because the smoke bomb, you could see that all the way in Alexandria, where I was at. As soon as you came out the building, just a cloud of black smoke in the sky. But the outpouring of love and support, I think, help us to make it through it. To be honest, back then, I don't think the Army really had any provisions for anything like that, because we had not experienced that. So, you get your regular 30 days a year leave. So there's no real special leave or anything like that for it. So, I was going to work But I honestly believe, Sergeant Major, that I was just probably just so traumatized and clinically depressed that I was just in the motions. I don't think I was really connecting or in the present. I was just
Did you go through any counseling
doing
or
it.
anything?
I went in counseling for 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
The impact for me was I was on orders to go to Atlanta to be a battalion commander for a recruiting battalion. So I was slated to go to the battalion command course that spring, and then on into command. And after this happened, and I realized that I was clinically depressed, I asked for deferment to see if I could just get time to get myself together. And by the time all that process went through, um, I was on the next, like 2 years later, I would go into command instead of a year later. So it put me behind my peers, behind my year group. I had to make decisions on whether or not, to stay in the military, and that I'd have to spend more time to make the next rank. I wouldn't be able to, make the next rank on time. And it was just so much, because emotionally, I thought that I had it together, but other people around me could see the depression that I couldn't see.
Yeah.
And one of my mentees, who calls me mom still today, he was my LT back in the day, and he came to check on me, and he was overly concerned. He could see the depression before I could.
Yeah.
And he had asked, me, had I thought about going to counseling or getting any help or something. And I was like, wow, I'm fine. But I really wasn't fine, Sergeant Major. I wasn't. So I think my life was off balance, out of sorts for maybe a good 5 years afterwards, trying to figure out and be truthful. I don't even know, Deborah, to this day, if you could say that I think I got it together. 20 years later, I still don't think I have it together.
I think you're right about that. I think there's a part of your heart that'll never let you adjust. And, mine too.
You still do the milestones where there are things that are important that you would think would be important or better, with Larry or with Lacey, and it's kind of hard to skip past that. It kind of colors everything. So,
how did you make your adjustment, or what kind of help did you receive?
Well, Sergeant Major, that I told you I had a wonderful community at Fort Belvoir.
Yeah.
My garrison commander and all of his staff, a lot of the civilians, they were devastated for me. So it's really hard for me to be able to act as if I wasn't appreciative of that. And then we stood up. There was a new Army organization, an agency that was stood up, and they were probably not expecting it to be as successful, because it later became a command, and I understand it's not around now, but it was called the Installation Management Agency. And the Sergeant Major of the time, that would be you, gave me a job working with that organization. And so it just kind of snowballed. There's so much that's part of your regular day that becomes something that you do because you've always done it, and it's just helpful. It was a learning experience. It was new. So it distracted me a lot while I was at work.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily do that at home, but I spent 9 years with that organization and served until I deployed to Afghanistan with it. So I want to say that that's kind of the measure of how I survived it, was the people like you and others who decided they had other things I could do before I made a final decision about where I should go or what I should do. The depression part, it's really a difficult self-assessment whenever you have to reach out for that kind of care, and more difficult, I think, for a command sergeant major who is providing that kind of guidance to their soldiers. You spend a lot of time concerned about them, and I think in the process of being their command sergeant major, they helped me quite a bit, because there's nothing like comparing the tragedies that still exist today that everyone is going through. This is far more national, and it was on our country's radar, and certainly not a private event. But we have soldiers that still have tragedies and traumas in their lives, and you want to care for them. So I think that helped me.
I think it's a lot harder sometimes for senior leaders to seek any kind of counseling, any kind of assistance, or anything like that. Did you in fact go to counseling?
I don't think they told me that's what was happening. I had
you had to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah, I had it was strange because we had a wonderful colonel that was in charge of the hospital at Fort Belvoir, and I had, for an unexplainable reason, almost a bi-monthly meeting with her that occurred over lunch, and she talked about stuff in general, and I'm telling her how I'm feeling, and all the time I thought that she was just wanting to be connected with something that was happening. And later I find out that my boss and my casualty assistance officer, Major Bronte Montgomery, reached out and asked for some support. It was amazing. So I don't think I walked through a door knowing that's what I was there for, but I had a lot of on-spot counseling from many people, and she started it. So.
Yeah. Do you stay in contact with people that during 9/11 that
well, yes, I do.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Deborah and I just stumbled into each other again. Yes. But, Terry Maud, General Maud's wife, we became quite close. She was the face of G1, the spouse of G1 at that time. So we've never lost contact. We don't see each other all the time, but we're regularly in contact.
Yeah.
And what you try to avoid is having occasions to feel that loss the same way again. And it's hard when you're with people who had the same experience.
That's true.
You see each other differently, and you know what's behind their life, and it's just tough.
Yeah, this is a question for both of you. Do you ever go out and talk to groups of spouses about what happened on that day and give them some recommendations or suggestions? Or I'll ask you first. I mean, because a lot of times what happened is you go through a tragedy like this, and you sort of deal with it yourself, and you sort of get through it yourself. Most people are good at counseling or whatever, but I think a lot of times you ought to share those kind of things with other people, and I think it really, really helps a lot. That's for sure. I don't know, ma'am, do you ever do anything like that, or even think of that?
I had to think about that. I actually went to school for counseling. I was motivated to do that after having gone through my 9/11 experience. And so what I've done in church, I've led group studies with, widows or, folks who had just recently lost their loved one. And then that gives me an opportunity to share, because I could definitely be empathetic, having lost my loved one in such a national way. It wasn't private. So, you couldn't hide from it. So it gives me an opportunity to share that way, like materials and stuff that people had bought me or gave me when I was going through my loss and my grief. I share with folks now, having gone through what I've gone through. But I tell folks, that life is so short. And if I didn't learn anything else from this, I would learn how important relationships are. Because if you probably say the same thing, Deb, I know people would say to me like, I remember Sergeant Major Ivory, he did this for me, he was that for me, he was that, and it start resonating. It's relationships. And, the military, we're a family.
Absolutely.
We stick together like glue. And so I think that's what I miss being out of the military. I miss that in the civilian sector, but that's what I try to bring wherever I go.
It's funny when you say that, because when I moved and got in the civilian sector, I tried to treat it just like the Army. It just didn't work that way.
No, it's not quite the same.
Well, I just wasn't the same. So I guess the same question to you. Did you...
Well, remember, I stayed 8 years after Larry died. So
did you? I'm sure you shared some of that with the professional development classes.
Sergeant Major, you know that the Army, the other thing we do is we use imagery a lot with a lot of our conferences and the start of any kind of discussion about something that's touchy. And the chiefs of staff and everyone that had a meeting would open that session, usually with imagery from the Pentagon that day.
Wow.
I learned early on about the audience, because you could see quite a few of the men they knew who among their group had some immediate contact with that. So they would often side glance or rotate their head to see how I was doing back there. So I would say that while I didn't do formal speaking on it, when I did have Army speaking about the importance of our unit and working as a team, that often came into play. The folks that actually help you through your life, through your career, and they become a permanent part of your experience. So most civilians don't understand that you can have a separate family structure from non-related people. So I often would use some of the imagery, but not the one most personal to me.
Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up. Any final thoughts? Ma'am, we'll start with you. Any final thoughts or something that you want to share with the audience about whatever you want to share with the audience? And I apologize for crying too. You got me crying over here too. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it brings back some tough memories, but go ahead.
I think that we should never forget. We should never forget 9/11, the tremendous impact that it had on our country, our military. And I think that in never forgetting that, we have to realize that our freedom is not free. There is a cost to pay to have this free society that we have and that we enjoy in America. And I would grieve my heart to think that we would forget about that day and all the lives that was lost, so that we can sit here today in this way.
Yeah, never forget. Never allow yourself to forget.
Yeah.
So major final thoughts?
They're much in line with Deborah's. I would just say that it's a part of our life every year to expect that there's going to be a presentation on the national news. You can tell how deeply something cuts into our consciousness whenever you see it show in the media, and it shows for, I don't know, this time it was almost a week in advance in the specials. I remember Pearl Harbor and all the remaining ones. So I would just tell you, behind every person that's lost, there's a long line of family members that are affected by it, and it continues to affect them through several generations when they've lost somebody that was serving in defense not only of their country, and you certainly did not expect this to happen on our ground, but just in general, as people of this country, we have such an obligation to each other to continue that family line.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank Lieutenant Colonel Deborah Ivory and Command Sergeant Major Deborah Strickland for being on the show today. It's just an unbelievable show. And unfortunately, today that's the end of our podcast. We're going to have to try to wrap it up. But you've been listening to Your Next Mission podcast with me, Jack Tilley, 12th Sergeant Major of the Army. And I want all our listeners to remember that what you heard today was some people that care so much about our country, that believe in life, that believe in God, that shared all their personal things of their life with you guys today about that tragic day. And so I just tell you that this is a great country. We've got a lot of great people in it, and I love it. But never, never, never allow yourself to forget 9/11 and the people that are lost in that day. And again, I thank you for listening today, and God bless each and every one of you, and have a great day.